Sprout's attack can be separated into two separate parts. There's the throwing phase and then there's the bouncing phase. When you first throw your attack, you can throw it up to 5 tiles, but you can literally just throw it on top of yourself as well. And during this throwing phase, the attack is going to go over walls no matter what. And if there are a lot of walls in front of you and you try to aim on top of those walls, it's actually going to increase the distance so that way it goes completely over those walls, or it's going to be angled off slightly to the side, so whichever one is the shorter distance, that's where your attack's gonna go, even if you're not necessarily aiming there. And if you hit an enemy directly with the throwing part of your attack, it's gonna do the same amount of damage as if you waited for your entire attack to throw it and then bounce it and do all that stuff. Going to do the same amount of damage, and it's still going to explode with a radius of about a tile. But that's not where Sprout gets complicated. The bounce portion of the attack is where things get really, really weird. So in this bounce phase, it sort of acts like a Rico shot, and you'll start going into this part of the attack once the seed bomb hits the ground for the first time. And then once it hits the ground, it travels a fixed distance. So this doesn't have anything to do with how far you're aiming the attack. You can see in this example right here, I'm throwing my attack from very far away from the wall and it rebounds to this specific position, and then I go a lot closer to the wall and it still rebounds to that exact same position, and that's because this second portion of the attack has that fixed distance of 4.5 tiles. So even if you throw your attack on top of yourself, after it hits the ground the first time, it's still going to travel 4.5 tiles in any direction. I mean, that's not how physics works, but it's a thing. And then also during this portion of the attack, the seed bomb can actually bounce off walls. So that's why I like to compare this to a Rico shot. And actually, when you bounce your attack off a wall, it's going to gain more distance than it would if you just hit nothing with it. And you can sort of see that with this example here. If you throw the attack directly parallel to the wall, it gets that 9.5 tiles, the 5 tiles from the throwing portion and the 4.5 tiles from the bouncing portion of the attack. But when you bounce it off the wall, it goes past that point just horizontally, and you're doing it diagonally, so you also get a bit of extra distance that way too, so it really increases the amount of distance. And in this example, you can see the straight shot doesn't quite hit the bot, which is that little red circle at the top of the screen that you can see a portion of, but then when you bounce it off the side of the wall, it makes it all the way there and actually deals damage. So this is important to take into account when you're playing with Sprout. If you want to get a bit of extra distance, try to see if there are any walls nearby. And actually, for every wall you hit, it's going to add a tiny bit more distance. And you can tell this by the amount of times the seed bomb actually bounces off the ground. You can see that with a normal attack hitting no walls, it hits the ground once and then explodes. But if you throw your attack and it hits one wall, it's actually going to get 2 bounces and then it's going to hit. And with 2 walls, it bounces 3 times before it hits, and so on. And so the more bounces you see, that means you successfully bounced off the wall and you're getting that extra distance. And so actually, you can use your super to create a really small area, and if you throw your attack in there, it's going to bounce so much that it's going to last a really, really long time. And theoretically, it would go on infinitely, given that you get extra damage whenever you bounce off the walls, and the new walls are so close by. But actually, if this happens, your attacks are always going to be destroyed before the 10th bounce. So you can't really spawn an infinite number of these seed bombs. And so that's basically how the bounce portion of Sprout's attack works. Once again, if you hit a target with this attack, it's going to do the same amount of damage with the same radius. And even if you don't hit a target, it's still going to explode by the end of the attack. So now let's talk about Sprout's super, which is also a very complicated mechanic. So the super has a range of 7 2/3 tiles, and what it does is it spawns a cross of 5 tiles of vine hedge things. And this would be simple enough if this was all that it did, but there's an extra added bit, is that if you throw these hedges near already existing walls, they're going to fill in the gaps between those walls to create like a solid wall that your opponent can't walk through. And if you throw your hedges, vine things, and they hit another brawler and don't end up enclosing them into a space, they're going to instead push them out of the way. So you might be able to use that to your advantage in certain situations. Maybe you can push them farther away from you if they're trying to chase you in showdown or something like that. And now I try to look a bit into more about how it determines whether or not it's going to reach out and attach to a wall. Like, how close does it have to be? What orientation do things have to be in? And it seems very, very random, and it doesn't seem like it follows a very strict pattern. Now, if you throw your super in the same exact tile over and over again, it's going to produce the same exact pattern, but the pattern is so different on like every single tile, it's very, very confusing how this algorithm works. So I'm still looking into that, and if I get a finalized understanding of what this algorithm is, I will post it in the comments. But essentially, most of the time, what it's going to do is to attach to walls that are up to 3 tiles away. But if that wall itself like has no walls next to it, then it won't attach to it. So that's why in this situation, you can see that it won't attach and fill in the gap with the wall on the other side because it's only 1 tile wide. But in this situation, because it's facing the other direction and it's coming at the walls when they're all lined up in a row, it will attach to it. This is kind of confusing, but I think that's basically how it works. Also, it won't connect if it creates a 1x1 tile. Generally, this algorithm doesn't really create any 1x1 tiles that have walls on both sides of them, so it doesn't want to create 1x1 gaps because those are very, very difficult to walk through and kind of glitchy, so I understand why they did that. So hopefully, as more people start to investigate the super, we can come up with a more solid idea of what this algorithm is, but that's essentially what it does, and I think what it tries to do. So hopefully you can use those characteristics to your advantage when you're making those split-second decisions in-game. And the final thing you can do with your super, as I was sort of talking about before, is that you can enclose yourself in addition to other brawlers, and then once you're kind of trapped yourself in the corner, none of your opponents can actually get to you without breaking your walls first, so you can throw over your walls and attack enemies even though they can't really get to you. So that's a very useful application of the super and the way in which it reaches out to try to connect to other walls. That's basically it. There's a lot of moving parts to his main attack and to his super, so hopefully you can practice with him and figure it out a bit. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and a comment down below if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. But that's all for today, guys, so see you later.
Make the streams louder.